groovy.
Fighting action game Street Fighter 2スーパーファミコンで好評発売中。
Capcom.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Jim here with another collection video, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the games in my Street Fighter collection. And this may surprise you, but I'm actually a Street Fighter fan, imagine that. And I have a ton of Street Fighter games in my collection, so in order to keep this video from being like an hour long of just me sitting here babbling on and on about Street Fighter, I'm gonna split these up into a few different videos. So today we're actually just gonna be taking a look at the 8 and 16-bit Street Fighter games in my collection. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this little look into my Street Fighter fandom. Let's get started. The original Fighting Street for the PC Engine CD, and you know, right off the bat, I'm not gonna mince words here. I don't really like this game at all. It controls really poorly. Like, I've played a ton of Street Fighter 2, obviously. The controls are so super smooth, you know, pulling off Hadokens and Shoryukens or whatever other special moves. Like, it's extremely responsive, very easy to play game, very pick up and play, if you will. Not this game in the slightest. You could say the exact opposite about this game. There's nothing at all intuitive about the way it controls. Like, I am really trying, and I can't execute a fireball or a Shoryuken to save my life. Sometimes it happens, and more often than not, though, it doesn't. And just kind of like choppy, stiff. Overall, just, I mean, kind of a crappy game. I know that there are people out there that actually really like the original Street Fighter, and that's fine. And maybe it's more fun to play an arcade cabinet, like the one with those, you know, those big buttons that you have to hit harder in order to do light, medium, and heavy attacks. Maybe that's more fun than playing it on the PC Engine CD. Maybe somebody dropped the ball when they ported this game over, and maybe the arcade version plays, you know, light years better. But this is the only version I've ever played, and I don't really like it. I can kind of understand why they were kicking around, you know, making the Final Fight series into a continuation of Street Fighter and doing other things with the Street Fighter series, like Street Fighter 2010, because this was kind of crappy. So I guess they decided, you know, let's apply that name to something else that maybe we think can sell better, or something that'll be more fun. But as it you know stands, I don't like this game. Not good at all. I mean, the graphics and sound are okay, but the gameplay is just absolute dog shit. So this was a really rocky start for Street Fighter, and thankfully it got a lot better from here. But anyway, Fighting Street for the PC Engine CD, a hell of a way to kick off the Street Fighter series.
俺より強いやつに会いに行く。
ストリートファイター2スーパーファミコンで好評発売中。
Street Fighter 2010, and I'll just say, like, generally, I really like this game. I think it's an excellent action platformer on the NES. I think the graphics are really good. The soundtrack is awesome, and it's really fun. It's not like, you know, perfect gameplay. I wish the controls were a bit better, in particular as it applies to your attack. I wish you could attack in more directions more easily, maybe like a Contra or something, where you could, you know, kind of attack in multiple directions a little more easily. But overall, I like the gameplay a lot. It's very challenging, I'll grant you that. It can be very frustratingly difficult, but I don't mind that so much with my NES games. I appreciate games that are NES hard, as people like to say. But Street Fighter 2010, I know it's another game that showed up on AVGN, and maybe people who hadn't played it kind of got the wrong idea about it, that it wasn't any good. It's definitely good. It is difficult for sure, but very fun, plays really well, awesome graphics, awesome sound design. Yeah, it's kind of weird now, like in hindsight, that this is a Street Fighter game. It has absolutely nothing to do with Street Fighter. You're playing as Kevin, running around fighting aliens and doing all kinds of crazy shit. But Street Fighter 2010, as it stands, this is among my favorite 8-bit Capcom games. I think it's awesome. If you've never played Street Fighter 2010 because you were under the impression it was crappy, or it's got to be crappy, it's a Street Fighter game that has nothing at all to do with Street Fighter, don't be misled. This is a very good game. Street Fighter 2010, I like it a lot.
Capcom the Super
超えられるか俺を
Andrew
スーパーストリートファイター2スーパーファミコンで新登場
Capcom.
Okay, now we get to the bulk of this video, which is the various iterations of Street Fighter 2 on some 16-bit consoles, and I will say right away that Street Fighter 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I think it's one of the best games ever, just as far as popularizing a genre, really making 2D fighters a very popular genre of games, especially in arcades. If it wasn't for Street Fighter 2, then we might not have gotten the quality 2D fighters that followed it. Competition, breeds, excellence. Everybody wants to, put out the next best game and top the other guys. So after Street Fighter 2, then we got Mortal Kombat, and we got a whole slew of SNK fighting games, and we got Killer Instinct. We got a whole bunch of shitty fighting games, I will grant you that, but we got a lot of really good ones too, and I think Street Fighter 2 deserves all the credit for that. It's an excellent game and an excellent series of games. Let's get started first with the Super Famicom. Right off the bat, the original Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior, which this game I originally played, and I've told this story probably countless times before, played the arcade cabinet in my aunt and uncle's convenience store when I was, I want to say, 6 years old, and immediately became hooked on it. And then when my cousins bought this version of the game on the Super Nintendo, I basically went over to their house and never ever came off the Super Nintendo. I would just sit there and play Street Fighter 2 all day long. I would just, run through the arcade mode and then pick a different character and run through the arcade mode again and just play constantly. And if everybody always got really pissed at me because I played it so much that if they would come to sit down and we would play versus mode, they would just lose, over and over and over again, and they were kind of pissed at me, and it developed kind of like a stigma that all he ever does is play games. Don't ever play games with him. It's not any fun. He doesn't even give you a chance. And when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I didn't give people a chance. Maybe I was a little high on my Street Fighter abilities, which weren't great, mind you, but they were better than what my cousins or my brother and sister were throwing at me. But the original Street Fighter 2, one of my all-time favorite games. I know in my top 10 Capcom fighting game video, I said that Alpha 3 is my all-time favorite Street Fighter game, and it is. But as far as just like games in general, Street Fighter 2 is, I think it goes beyond that. It's not just like a favorite Street Fighter game or something, just favorite games, period, of all time. Games that really had an impact on me, because this was the game also that introduced me to 2D fighters, which became one of, if not my favorite genre of video games. So Street Fighter 2, just big time, one of the all-time greats. Love this game so much. And then that was obviously followed by Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Hyper Fighting. And I'll just point out, I'll hold these up, the box art on the Super Famicom boxes, I think, is just amazing. I think definitely better than the US box art, which was typically the case. I don't know why you wouldn't use this in the US, because this is some excellent artwork, but who the hell knows. Anyway, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, really cool just for the fact that you could play as, what were they, like the four, what do they refer to them as? The four kings or the four something or other. But Balrog Bison, Sagat, and Vega. So that was really cool. You could play as them in here, and you had a lot of different speed settings and everything like that. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, like not a huge improvement over the first game. Like it's faster, and you get a handful more characters. But I don't think I ever played this one as a kid. Actually, I didn't know anybody who had Turbo, and I didn't have Turbo. I just played a ton of the original, but Turbo still very cool. But then Super Street Fighter 2 came out, and again, the box art is super cool because it has illustrations from the animated movie, which is excellent, and the back of the box is pretty cool too. It's got all the characters in the background. Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers. This is, again, not one that I owned, but a girl that lived down the street from me owned Super Street Fighter 2, and I would always go over to her house to play fighting games with her, mainly this and Killer Instinct. But when I started playing this, I thought it was like just absolutely excellent. It was still, classic Street Fighter 2, but then you've got, I really liked Fei Long. Like when I saw Fei Long and instantly recognized him as a Bruce Lee style character, I was like, wow, this character is really cool. So Super Street Fighter 2, especially more in like recent years, if I pull a Street Fighter game off of the shelf to, just play through quickly, I'll usually pick Street Fighter 2 because there's a bigger roster, but also if you just play the arcade mode one player, there's more fights to go through because you kind of go through everyone. I think it gives you like 10 or 12 fights to go through, so it's a nice lengthy little single player. You can sit there for about a half hour, 45 minutes and play through this. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, my Super Famicom Street Fighter 2 variants, all really cool, but again, the original Street Fighter 2, one of my all-time favorite games, a huge impact on me, but really, what else can you say about Street Fighter 2? It's awesome. Anyway, the Super Famicom versions, my favorite 16-bit versions of these games, by the way, absolutely outstanding.
NEC
ストリートファイター2ダッシュついに登場。今買って応募すると漏れなくオリジナルチュンリーファンブックがもらえる。買うならこれだ。 PC エンジン版ストリートファイター2ダッシュ。
Street Fighter 2 Dash for the PC engine, which this is basically just Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, so you have all the characters playable. This game is an excellent port of Street Fighter 2. The graphics and sound, everything is really good, and it plays well. The problem is I do not have a 6-button PC Engine controller, so I've had to play this with just a standard PC Engine controller, which is tricky because you have to use the run button as your light attack, and then the 1 and 2 buttons are your medium and heavy, and you have to hit select to swap back and forth between your punches and kicks, so you can't pause the game at all, which is, makes it less fun, I guess, playing with that controller. I need to get my hands on a 6-button PC Engine controller. This would be a much more enjoyable game if that were the case. But as it stands, yes, I believe this is the biggest. Let me take out the hue card here. It's got this like raised thing here. I don't know why that is, because apparently the game is all kept like up in here. But I guess they put that there to emphasize that it is such a big game, because it's my understanding that this is the biggest game on hue card, which is believable because, again, the graphics and sound are really good, and you have the whole roster of characters to choose from. So this game is really good on the PC Engine. I would just have to imagine it's a lot better if you have the 6-button controller. But anyway, it's Street Fighter 2 Dash on the PC Engine. One of my favorite games, one of my favorite consoles. It's awesome.
強いものこそ美しい。女 ガ伝説始まる。ストリートファイター2ダッシュプラスメガドライブで発売中。
Alright, and here we have my two Mega Drive Street Fighter 2 ports, and this is an instance where I did play this back in the day, but I was playing it with the standard 3-button Genesis controller, and so I immediately had a bad impression of Street Fighter on the Mega Drive because it was not nearly as fun to play with a 3-button controller than it was to play with all the buttons on the Super Nintendo controller. Later though, I finally got to play this using a 6-button Mega Drive controller. It becomes an immensely better game. You could say, if you're playing this with a 6-button controller, probably better playing than the Super Nintendo versions, just because the buttons are all really conveniently lined up. It's definitely better than using shoulder buttons. So, yes, these games play really well, and also just the graphics and sound design, everything about them is cool, but let's get into them. First up, again, Street Fighter 2 Dash Plus, and I'm not 100% sure what the plus is. I guess maybe more speed settings. Actually, I think that's probably exactly what it is. Like, there are 10 different speed settings or something crazy like that. This is an excellent version of Street Fighter Champion Edition, and then of course we have to have Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, excuse me, the new challengers, again with the really cool artwork from the animated movie, and then on the background, again, all the characters in the background. I've said it before, I'll say it again, Japanese box art just can't be beat. Anyway, Street Fighter 2 on the Mega Drive is outstanding if you have a 6-button controller. If you have a 3-button controller, it's not nearly as fun as playing it on the Super Nintendo. If you got that 6-button controller, it rivals the Super Nintendo. Potentially better, I can't say. It's a subjective thing. Just historically, I've always preferred playing my Street Fighter on the SNES, but the Mega Drive games, really excellent too, and any way you slice it, it's Street Fighter 2, so it's always going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, Street Fighter 2 Dash Plus, the Champion Edition, it's a very long title, and Super Street Fighter 2, the Tournament Battle. I just now read this for the first time. Oh, it's on the back. It says Tournament Battle on the back, but on the front it says, yeah, Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers. Both of these games, absolutely amazing on the Mega Drive. Just play them with a 6-button controller, and yeah, they're really, really good.
どこまで強くなるのか。ストリートファイター2ターボスーパーファミコンで発売中。
And last but not least, to finish up my 16-bit Street Fighter collection, this is a game that is definitely ported better to other consoles, but that doesn't make it a bad game. It's Street Fighter 02 for the Super Famicom. And before I start talking about the game, let's once again take a little time to just appreciate the box art. It's very cool. It's not totally accurate because Goki isn't, really that tall in the game, but it's a very effective looking cover. Goki and Ryu staring into each other's eyes, about to fight. You know what this game's all about. It's about fighting. Aside from the fact that it's called Street Fighter, this image tells you that it's about fighting. And then of course on the back you get a cool little bit of Sakura artwork. This game obviously being the game that introduced Sakura, who became a fan favorite. She's one of my favorites as well. This game, first of all, I'll say that Street Fighter 02 is another one of my favorites in the Street Fighter 0 system. I love the graphics, I love the soundtrack, the gameplay is outstanding, the roster is amazing. There's really nothing bad I can say about Street Fighter 02 in general, and it's definitely best played on the Sega Saturn if you're not playing it in an arcade. Also, pretty good on the PlayStation. This version, it's still, like, I was impressed when I first played this back in the day in like 96 or something when it came out. I rented it from Blockbuster Video. I was like, oh cool, new Street Fighter game. I was impressed with the graphics and sound in here at the time. There are like little load times here and there, which is kind of like crappy and weird for a Super Nintendo game, but generally speaking, I think they ported this to the SNES about as well as they could have. The gameplay is still pretty solid. You get all the characters in there. The graphics, while obviously they're not as good as the arcade or the Sega Saturn or something like that, they're still respectable. They're pretty good graphics. It's still a colorful, detailed game. You get all the stages. You don't get all the animations and things like that, obviously, but you do get all the stages. You do get all the characters. It all looks nice enough. And the soundtrack, again, I said this game has an amazing soundtrack, and it does if you're playing it on the Saturn, PlayStation, arcade. Absolutely beautiful sound. Q Sound was what they were using, and I believe Alpha Lila did all of the music, which was Capcom's in-house band at the time. They always made amazing music for all these 90s Capcom games. So they translated it to the SNES sound chip. Again, I guess about as good as they could have, so it still sounds pretty good. So again, it goes without saying that yes, this is an inferior port of this game to all those other ones I named, but still not a bad game. This is still a pretty fun play on the Super Nintendo. If you could pick it up and play it, I would recommend you do. Again, you're not going to like it maybe as much as the Saturn version, but it's still a very enjoyable game. Street Fighter 02 Super Famicom. Real excellent game. Not so bad.
どこまで強くなるのか。ストリートファイター2ターボスーパーファミコンで新発売。
And that's it. That'll do it. Let me grab these guys over here. For all my 8 and 16-bit Street Fighter games. Not a whole lot of games, mind you, but that's when we get into 32-bit and beyond. That's where we really start to see lots and lots of ports of Street Fighter games. Anyway, everyone, if you sat all the way through this, then bless you. You have a ton of patience, because I'm sure I sat here and talked about Street Fighter way longer than I should have, and I was probably tripping over my words the entire time. But yeah, thanks for sticking around and listening to some of my anarchic Street Fighter ramblings. It's obviously one of my favorite series of all time. It's a series that I love to collect games for. I'd be collecting a lot more figures for if I actually had room for them in this tiny little Japanese apartment. But yes, Street Fighter, one of the greatest series of games ever. It's the game that got me into 2D fighting games. It's the game that really made me take note of Capcom. I'd been playing Mega Man before that, but I never really noticed like who made it. I never really cared because I was like 5 years old. But that Capcom logo coming up at the beginning of Street Fighter 2, every time I turned on my SNES, that logo came up. That was one of the first like game developers that I took note of, and I was like, wow, this is made by Capcom. I think I like that company. I wonder what other games they make. So this series got me into fighting games, and it got me into Capcom games in general, or it made me aware of Capcom. We'll put it that way. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. Come back next time for the continuation of this Street Fighter collection of mine. And until next time, thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Goodbye.